Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Skinwalker horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. You all need to chill about Skinwalkers. I've been lurking around this subreddit for a while now, reading some of the biggest hits and the like. This is the first time I've actually made an account. First of all, let me thank each and every one of you for making me feel less alone. I've seen and done some crazy things in my life, and I'm not proud of some of them. Reading all of your stories makes me feel more normal. Now that's over, you all need to chill about the Skinwalkers. I mean, the second you see someone talk about their experiences in a forest, you all run around screaming Skinwalker, like it's the end of the whole world and they're definitely going to die. And you do that regardless of where they are geographically, what time of year it is, or even the types of events they're experiencing. Honestly, it's enough to make me want to bang my head against the wall sometimes. First of all, they aren't even Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers probably don't even exist anymore, since the Navajo culture has dwindled significantly and, to my knowledge, there have been no Navajo shamans who have rejected their faith in recent years. It's possible there's one or two still around, but they're going to be low in number and in northeast Arizona and parts of New Mexico. They're desert dwellers and aren't even found in forests. The creatures that you're calling Skinwalkers have never been given a proper name, but I've called them voice takers since I first encountered one when I was 12 or so. Back then, I lived with my parents in the forests of Northern California way off the beaten track. I mean, it was like an hour drive to the nearest town. It was that isolated. Our family had lived there for almost 40 years, so the creatures in the forest more or less left us alone until I got old enough to wander into the woods by myself. They were always curious about me, and more than once I had one knocking on my window in the early hours of the morning, but I don't count those as encounters because I was never in any real danger. The first time one properly got to me, I was 12 years old and out in the forest alone for the first time. It was my first year going to school instead of being homeschooled by my mother, and I, like most 12-year-olds, hated school. So I went into the forest to blow off some steam. It was getting dark already and was approaching sunset, which is important because voice takers, like most of the creatures in the forest, are nocturnal. I was walking along one of the trails, not paying attention to where I was going, when I heard someone call my name. They sounded just like my mother. So I called back, "Mom," and, of course, it called to me again. Let me just say that this voice taker was smart. In fact, it was the smartest voice taker that I've ever come across. Most of the time, they aren't much more intelligent than your average dog, which is why they usually imitate animals. That's just as effective as using a human voice. You would not believe the number of campers who will follow the sound of a dog barking in the forest for miles. Anyway, it was calling me from the direction of my house. So, of course, I turn around and start heading back towards the house and towards the voice taker. It's still calling me, and I'm yelling back every couple minutes. And then it says, "Alicia, I can hear you. Come over here." It sounded like my mother was terrified. I never saw my mother afraid before or after this incident, but I knew that she was then. This voice taker does fear and anxiety really well, by the way. Before I moved away from that house, I could pick it out of a crowd because it always sounds hurt. So I start panicking a little, not knowing why she was upset. I could tell that my mom was off the path, so I stepped off of it and kept following the sound of her voice, all the while telling her I was coming and to just wait for me. I get to where her voice is coming from, and it's coming from right behind this big tree. I walked around it, and the voice taker was there. One of the things you guys always get right is that voice takers don't want to be seen. They prefer to stay hidden until the very last second, And there is a damn good reason for that. They're ugly and awkward and won't pass for anything besides a voice taker when you lay eyes on them. This one was standing upright with its back against the tree, with its huge circular mouth hanging open, humpbacked with its shoulders at an awkward angle. One of its legs had been broken at some point, and it was standing awkwardly. It was scary as hell to hear my mother's voice echoing out of that gaping circular hole it called a mouth. "There you are, Alicia," it said. I tried to run away, obviously, but it grabbed me. It wasn't much larger than I was, and it was skeletal and weak-looking, but being grabbed by it felt like I was being held by an adult 3 times my size. It threw me to the ground and climbed on top of me. That mouth expanded vertically, and then the rest of its body did too, like it had a zipper from the top of its head all the way down to its belly button. Flesh peeled backwards and opened up, exposing the inside of its body. The bones went too, the ribs and skull flexing like they were made of rubber. It was hollow inside except for these pale sacs of flesh that hung pulsating from the inside of its rib cage and what looked like tonsils in its throat. I was trying to scream, but by then the weight of its body had pressed all the air out of my lungs. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest, and I couldn't move my arms or legs. Those pale organs inside of its rib cage started to grow and reach toward my face, and my adrenaline spiked so hard I felt my consciousness try to leave my body. It gave me a needed boost of clarity and awareness of my body. I managed to get my legs up against the voice taker and started kicking the inside of its torso, contorting my body to keep my face as far away from its organs as possible. After a couple seconds of that, it shifted to hold down my legs and I got my arm loose. To this day, I don't know why I thought it was a good idea, but I reached out and punched it in the tonsil. It screamed so loud and in so many different voices all at once that my senses almost couldn't handle it. It was like being blasted full volume with every action movie fight scene all at once. My ears started ringing and I actually thought I had died for a moment. Then I realized I was still alive and I punched again, hitting the other voice sac this time. The same thing happened again, and the voice taker was finally stunned enough to loosen its hold on me a little bit. I kicked it off of me and got to my feet. I seized the nearest large stick and hit the thing in the head twice. Then its zipper started to close up again. Instead of leaving well enough alone, I grabbed whatever I could from the ground and stuffed it inside. Rocks, leaves, beetles, flowers, pine needles, it all went into that voice taker. I wasn't able to get much in there, but what I did manage was enough to make it retch and spill open again, its body literally turning inside out. While it was lying there writhing and flapping like a demonic manta ray, I stood up, still holding the stick I had used to beat it, which is when I noticed there were 3 more watching me from the tree line. At this point, it was almost fully dark, but I could make them out because my entire body was aware of their shape now, like how you instantly recognize a snake when you see one. I was dead terrified, but I was angry too at that point, and I knew they wouldn't just let me leave. So I screamed it loudly as I could. "What the fuck do you want? I'll beat you all too." But none of them approached me, and after a few seconds, I backed away from all 4 of them. When none followed, I took my new stick and ran all the way back to the house. I was bleeding from the ears and temporarily deaf for about 10 minutes afterward, and sometimes I still hear ringing in my ears because of it. The voice takers never tried to lure me away ever again. I would tell you that I don't know why they all didn't pile onto me that night and kill me, but that would be a lie. I won't tell you why right now, though. If people ask, I might explain later, but for now, let's just say that there's a whole lot more than voice takers in most forests, and they're like coyotes or foxes in terms of the food chain, mostly feeding off scraps and remains other creatures leave behind. I learned later that their diet mostly consists of leaves and grass, that they only go after humans and other large animals during their breeding season, which begins in late summer and extends to mid-fall. The other thing that I learned later is why punching that voice taker in the tonsil, they collect sounds in the sacs in their throat. I don't know how, but they literally capture voices and release them back out. The voice taker that attacked me must have been hanging around the house for months or years catching fragments of my mother's voice in order to catch me off guard. When I punched those sacs, I released all of the sounds that the voice taker had stored up. It was the equivalent of punching someone's breath out of them, but like I had actually managed to collapse its lungs. Now, obviously, I don't recommend dealing with voice takers this way, since you'll probably just be eaten by others even if you incapacitate one in this way. Instead, if you think you're being attacked by voice takers, set up speakers facing outwards from your house or campsite and place something with a whole bunch of voices in it. Sitcoms and comedy shows with ensemble casts are best, especially if they have a laugh track. The voice taker will be so preoccupied with collecting new voices and sounds that it will probably stop trying to attack you for that night. And then instead of hearing the voices of your friends or animals calling you from the woods, you get to hear snippets of dialogue from The Office for a week or so. It's good fun, and a lot less difficult to explain away. Plus, you'll give the other creatures in the woods a laugh with it, which is always a good first impression. If voice takers are your biggest problem, you've gotten off easy. I should mention that some of the other creatures that stories here have lumped in under the title Skinwalker are different from the voice takers and are a whole lot more difficult to deal with. But I don't want to make this any longer than it already is, and I'm not convinced you'll take my advice even if I gave it. Thank you all for reading, and I hope you appreciate my advice and story. It's really helped me to type this out and get it off my chest. I never told anyone about what happened with the voice takers, not even my parents. Neither of them believed in their existence, and I never got the chance to prove it to them. Second story. My friend's Skinwalker story. Back in college, a buddy and I were hanging out in our dorm room, smoking some weed and chilling. We get on the topic of creepy pastas and stuff, and I mentioned that I've heard some really creepy Skinwalker stories. My buddy gets really quiet out of nowhere. I saw one, once, up close and personal. That shit is real, bro. Of course, I asked him to tell me more. He said he didn't like talking about it, but eventually opened up. So his story took place back in the summer before he left for college. Him and his high school friend group had planned a big, last hurrah camping trip. He was from Scottsdale, Arizona, and I think he said they only drove a good hour and a half outside the city to one of their friend's parents' ranching properties. There's about 8 people in their group, and everyone shows up around the same time in 3 separate cars. Around when they show up, it's already starting to get dark, so they set up their tents and a campfire and start drinking and smoking. This one dude in their group, let's call him Tim, is being a little more quiet than usual. My buddy asks him what's wrong, and he says something like, "I don't feel good, just a little under the weather today." Regardless, they start making brats and are all having a good time. Then out of nowhere, everyone notices Tim is gone. Just totally vanished. Nobody even saw him leave, even though everyone was relatively close to the fire. The group starts calling his name, thinking he's pranking everyone. Then they start to get worried once Tim has been gone for over an hour. So my friend and a couple others go out into the hills to search for him. They walk around for a good 15 minutes calling his name before they finally get a response. It's not Tim. Instead, they hear the familiar howl of a coyote, and it's answered by a couple other coyotes. My buddy says he was a little worried at this point that Tim might have gotten dragged off by the wild animals. Everyone in their group was paranoid because there's no way Tim could have gone missing without anyone noticing. Just no way. They hear another howl, suddenly. It's longer than the others. and different in that it sounds off, like if someone had a recording of a coyote howling and decided to play it. My friend's blood ran cold when the howl ended in a sort of hacking laughter. And unlike the howl, the laughter sounded close, like 20 feet away close. The group starts frantically looking around, convinced Tim is out there fucking with them. He isn't. They don't see anyone. They return to the fire a little shaken up. Everyone is really starting to get worried at this point. The group starts considering calling the police when suddenly a truck pulls up to the campsite. It's Tim's truck. Tim steps out of it and is wondering why everyone has been freaking out. Tim says he's sorry. He got off work 2 hours late and hurried out to the ranch as fast as he could. This is when the group realizes that Tim didn't carpool there with anyone. As if on cue, they hear another long, drawn-out howl just like the other one. At that point, the group noped the fuck out of there. They ended up paying to camp in a designated campground, and the night went on as normal. But my friend still says he thinks about when he asked Tim if he was all right. He claims that at the time he could definitely tell something was off about Tim, but didn't think anything of it. But now he's 100% convinced that Tim was some sort of Skinwalker entity impersonating his friend for shits and giggles. How the creature knew what Tim looked and sounded like, well, he has no explanation for that. Maybe it just got inside their heads. Third story. That time I saw a Skinwalker, a witch, and a werewolf. Late summer, 1986. We were driving through the Rocky Mountains on our way to Ouray. There were 3 of us, Steve, Danny, and me. We were young, dumb, and fed up with what life was really like after college. So we bought some matches, packed a cooler of beer, food, and beer, and loaded up my trusty Toyota with all the fixings for a classic camping trip. This trip was supposed to shake up the devastating monotony of our daily life, and shake us up it did to the very core. Right before we were getting ready to set out, Steve's mom ran out of the house and told him he should take their newly adopted family dog, Luna, for safety. Steve was hesitant. He didn't want to have to look after the dog, especially if we were going to be drinking. And she was a big dog, a mixed husky and something else, Great Dane maybe. But his mom insisted until, finally, he broke and agreed to take her. Luna looked up at him with her warm blue eyes and seemed to smile. Steve sighed and said, "I guess I'll sit in the back with her." No, I said, walking over and patting her head. Let her sit up front with me. She wagged her tail. Most of the car ride went smoothly, and we sang along to the radio, mooed at cows, and waved at, or flipped off, motorcyclists. But as we neared our destination, and the sun sank behind us, leaving us in a thick, almost tangible darkness, we started to become jumpy, pointing at strange shadows and swift movements. Luna, though, was curled up and asleep beside me, unaware of our growing fear. The sky was covered in big, roiling clouds that blew swiftly towards the east, covering and revealing the full moon at random intervals. By now we were the only vehicle on the road. My headlights barely sliced the darkness around us as we weaved our way through the mountains. The isolation, the darkness, the silence, it was all so crushing. "Steve, I thought you said we would be there before the sun set. I told you we shouldn't have stopped at that bar." "Ah, Danny, I didn't know we'd be there for that long. You wouldn't stop your stupid pool game. And I won. Come on, it's not that dark out. Would some money make you happy? You asho. Hey, cool it. Look, what the hell is that?" I slowed the car down to a stop, trying to see what was blocking the road, but the light from the cloud-covered moon was too dim. "What the hell?" "Danny," I whispered as she rolled down her window. I was apprehensive, worried this was someone's attempt to rob us, or worse. I had heard all the urban legends before. "I just want to see better." She stuck her head out of the window, and I rolled a little bit closer. "Luna, feeling the change in the car's movement, lifted her head and sat up, panting. Oh shit. I think it's a dead deer, you guys. Gross. Danny retreated back inside the car and rolled the window back up. Who the hell just leaves something like that on the road? Assholes, Steve said, then leaned forward. Hey, man, think you can drive around it? Yeah, I think I can. I approached the thing, now seeing the antlers and the gleaming black eyes, open, staring, dead. It blinked. I yelped and jerked the steering wheel, side-swiping the mountainside. Shit. What the hell, man? It's alive. What? That fucking deer. It's alive. As I spoke, the deer lifted its head and bleated. The sound echoed around the chasm. We all jumped and watched as it pushed itself up until it was standing on its hind legs, like a man, but uncanny, grotesque. Mesmerized, we sat unable to move as the thing walked over to us, slowly, decidedly, as if walking on two legs was a thing this deer did often. It leaned down next to Danny's window, its face so close to the glass that steam from its nose fogged it up. A low noise rang out through the car. Luna was growling, her hackles raised, crouched in the seat next to me. Bang. The thing rammed its head into the window. Chaos erupted. Danny screamed. Piercing. High. Luna started barking, booming, persistent. Steve yelled, telling me to fucking go. Just go. I, shaking, struggled with the clutch, stalling. Bang. The window cracked and the thing started making an incredible sound. It sounded like a weird screeching, guttural form of laughter. Finally, the clutch caught and I sped the hell out of there. I checked the rear view and saw the thing, standing on two legs, looking after us. Suddenly, it leapt forward and began running after us. It ran on two legs instead of four, and it was fast, so fucking fast. I drove as fast as I could on that winding mountain road, but, despite my speed, the thing still caught up with us. It tapped its antlers on my window and screeched that weird laughter again. Then it pointed in front of us, bared its teeth, and stopped. The abruptness of how quickly it disappeared caught me off guard. Watch out. I snapped forward and what I saw made me slam on my brakes. A house. A fucking house in the middle of the road. I guess it was more of a cottage or a hut, but there it was, clear, vivid, in front of us. Danny was audibly crying in the back seat, repeating, "What the fuck?" over and over to herself. Steve was breathing heavily, like he had just run a marathon. Luna was whimpering beside me and scratching at the window. Nausea enveloped me, made worse by the vibration from my pounding heart. Seriously, what the fuck is going on? I think I'm going to puke, man. Don't fucking open that door. Just back up. Turn around, man. Let's go back. Towards that thing? No fucking way, man. Well, if you didn't fucking notice, there's a goddamn house in front of me. Just drive through it, come on. No. It. Danny, calm down. It's okay. We're okay. We'll be okay. Danny simpered and started sobbing again. Shut the fuck up, Danny. Please. Guys, look. Oh God. The house, it was spinning, slowly, and stopped when the front of it pointed directly at my car. The door to the house slammed open, emitting a sound like a gunshot. A single point of light emerged from the darkness inside the house. A candle, and holding it up was a figure, stooped over, covered in what looked like blackened rags. It began to approach us, lurching forward swift, then slow, then swift again. It was making this eerie deep staccato sound. Are you for real right now? Steve was leaning forward, peering out the windshield. Let's go. Reverse. That thing is behind us. Run it over. Look. Danny screamed. The stooped figure was now running at full speed straight at us. It slammed onto my hood, and we could finally see that it was an old woman, covered in wrinkles, completely bald, with sharpened yellow teeth. She was moaning and moaning. She crawled up the hood, opened her mouth, and licked the glass, leaving a trail of blood-colored saliva. Luna went wild, barking, foaming at the mouth, throwing herself at the door. Please, 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 please it. Back up now. I slammed my foot on the gas, but my tires made a sickening sound and the smell of burnt rubber slipped into the car. It's behind us. It's fucking behind us. I turned back to see the deer's head, teeth still bared, peering at me from the back window. Shit. Fuck. What do we do? What do I do? Luna. No. With a final lunge, Luna forced the door open. It sounds shocking, but she was such a large dog and strong. A powerful wind picked up and the roiling clouds dissipating, allowing the light from the full moon to illuminate the scene in front and behind us. Luna was as still as a statue, slightly crouched, poised to leap. The hackles on her back quivered and a single thread of drool spun itself down from her mouth. She began to shake, faster and faster. It looked like she was having a seizure. The old woman and the deer thing were both looking over at her. Something strange was happening to Luna. It looked as if her limbs were breaking, elongating. Her snout narrowed, sinking closer to her face. She rose up onto her hind legs, humanoid, and held up towards the sky before locking eyes with the hag on my car. In the blink of an eye, Luna was on the woman, ripping her away, shaking her to and fro in her jaw like a rag doll. Luna flung the woman towards the house, and she struck it with some force and didn't get back up. The house and the woman vanished in a puff of smoke. Luna turned towards the thing behind us. It screeched, raising itself up to its full height, challenging her. Luna howled again, then licked her fangs. The thing took 2 steps towards her, before turning tail and fleeing down the road, Luna giving chase. They both ran on 2 legs instead of 4. We sat in total silence for a few moments, until I leaned over and slammed the passenger side door closed. I think Danny passed out. I turned to look at Steve. He looked at me. Let's get out of here, man. We got 2 miles before the thunk beneath us couldn't be ignored any longer. A flat tire. I pulled over and we had the darkness around us, paranoid. I'm not changing it. I'm not going out there, Steve said, loudly. Don't worry. There's no spare. What? I took it out to make room for all the camping stuff. Are you fucking kidding me? Nope. Well, what the hell do we do now? I sighed. I didn't know. Suddenly, like magic, like a miracle, headlights appeared behind us. A godsend. A car. I hope they're normal. Me too. Should we tell them? We locked eyes again. No. If they bring it up, maybe. If it's a cop, definitely not. He'll think we're high. The car rolled up beside us. It was totally black with tinted windows. The window rolled down and behind it sat a middle-aged man. He looked tired, maybe sad. Need some help? Oh, thank God, Steve whispered. Yes, flat tire. Don't have a spare. Well, that's dumb, the man said. You should always carry a spare. Always. Never know what could happen. Lucky for you. I think I have one that will fit your car. You joking? The man shook his head and hopped out of his car. He was dressed sharply, black suit, black tie, black shoes, all covered by a trench coat. Come on, you can hold the flashlight for me. I hesitated, then exited the car. What happened here? He pointed to the window next to Danny's head. Oh, it's been like that for a while. Dumb neighbor kid hit it with a baseball. The man nodded, and her. Tired, just tired. we've been driving for a while. Driving where? Ure, for camping. Nice place. We've heard. Say, the man said, releasing the jack. Job done? Seen anything weird tonight? My heart sped up, and I looked around as half expecting the deer, or the woman, or Luna to come sprinting towards us. What do you mean weird? Oh, I dunno. Anything out of the ordinary. No. Why? Oh, no reason. Just heard some spooky tales. Tales that the natives who used to live around here would tell. What tales? The man stood up and dusted his hands off on his coat. Well, he said, ignoring my question, you're all set. You're about 20 minutes out from Ure, and 2 hours from the sunrise. I'd advise you get a move on. Never know what might be stalking you out there. I'm headed the same way, actually. I can drive behind you if you like. A muffled yes came from inside the car, and we both looked up to see Steve nodding voraciously. Yeah, that would be great, actually. The corners of the man's mouth twitched a bit as he nodded, sliding back into his car. We drove to Ure without incident, and as soon as we hit the city, the man in the car behind us flashed his brights twice, then flipped a U-turn, speeding back down the way we came. I thought he said he was going this way, I said, looking in my rear view. Who cares? Let's get a hotel room and leave first thing tomorrow morning, Danny said. She had woken up as we were driving towards Ure. We filled her in on the strange man and how he helped us, but she was still spooked and jumpy. And we did just that. We didn't dare camp in the wilderness or even leave the relative safety of the town. On the way back to civilization, we swore to never tell anyone what happened. It was too weird, uncanny, horrifying. Steve was silent, afraid of what his mom might say or do about Luna. We made up some story about how she had fallen over a cliff after chasing a deer. Per Luna. We did stop for an hour around the area it happened and called out to her, but to no avail. We never saw her again. It's been years since this happened, and I'm old now. The three of us lost touch after we returned from the trip, but vowed to keep this secret to our death. Last I heard, Steve died from a heart attack and Danny was diagnosed with stomach cancer. I figured it's about time I shared my tale. Maybe it'll help me make some semblance of sense out of it. In the end, though, I don't know if those things were protecting us from her, or if she was protecting us from them. I guess I'll never know. Sometimes, late at night, when I hear howling, I like to imagine it's Luna, out there, somewhere, running free in the wild. Fourth story. My boyfriend brought a Skinwalker to my house. Unad Dash. Natalie, I swear to God, if you say that word, I'll kick you out of my car and leave you on the side of the road, Haley threatened. You know, Lucia is what I was trying to say to my friend Haley. In case you don't know what that is, that's the Navajo name for a Skinwalker. I just found this out not too long ago, too. Skinwalkers are an interesting Navajo legend. Basically, they're like shapeshifters. I know a lot of people who live out in the secluded countryside that have claimed to see them. I, personally, never saw one before. Not until my idiot boyfriend brought one to my house. Now, before my boyfriend told me about his Skinwalker stalker, I had always teased Haley about them. We would drive through secluded areas at night, just for the thrill of what lies in the darkness, but she wasn't a fan when I brought them up in her car. I'd make comments about them just to freak her out. Haley, what if we saw a deer standing on its hind legs in the field next to us? What if you saw yourself sprinting behind the car in the rearview mirror right now? Despite my teasing, I really did believe in skinwalkers. I've always believed in legends and supernatural beings like that, and it was interesting to learn about. Not that I really did that much deep diving into the subject, but what I did learn freaked me out. You would think that would keep me from making jokes about it in prime Skinwalker territory, but not all of us have that much common sense. I'm not the only one, though. Like I had mentioned before, I don't believe my jokes are what brought one to my house. You see, my boyfriend lives out in the countryside, with lots of open space around him. He's always mentioned how he felt like something was stalking him out there, watching as he moved from his car to the house. He always kind of assumed it was some type of freaky animal. His suspicions were confirmed, but it wasn't exactly what he thought it was. According to him, he saw a skinwalker in the field when he came home from my place one night. Gavin, come on. You didn't see a skinwalker. Nat, I'm telling you, most animals aren't that tall. And their eyes don't glow green. How much sleep did you get? He gave me a disapproving look. His claim was that the night before, when he got home, he saw a tall, looming creature watching him from the tree line with bright green and glowing eyes. Now, like I said, I do believe in skinwalkers, but my boyfriend also doesn't get much sleep, so of course I figured he was hallucinating something watching him. I wasn't hallucinating. There was a skinwalker at my place, and I saw him, and I literally almost pissed my pants. I promise, I wasn't imagining anything. I caved in and told him I believe him, and as long as he didn't conjure one up at my place, that's all that mattered to me. Then we went to bed and never saw any skinwalkers again. That should have been the happy ending of this story, right? Nope. I really didn't think about it the next day. I mean, I live in a pretty busy area. It's not exactly where you would think most skinwalkers reside, but maybe some have a preference for bigger cities. More people to stalk, I guess. Throughout the day, I had been cleaning the house, getting it ready for the week ahead. Since I work close to 40 hours a week, I really don't have much time to clean, so I basically just do it when I can. Time flew by, and at 8:40 p.m., all I had to do was take out the trash. It's around the time of year where night falls pretty early, so I had to take the trash out in the dark. Normally that wouldn't really bother me, but because of my boyfriend's little tale that I happened to remember at that moment, it freaked me out. Just a little bit, not enough to piss my pants like some other people. When I stepped outside and heard a low growl, maybe that was closer to pissing my pants territory. My neighbors do have a little pit bull that they leave chained up outside, ridiculous, so I just blamed the noise on him. That's the most reasonable explanation, and to keep myself from freaking out, I had to stay reasonable. Then I saw the eyes. Not pit bull eyes. Not any dog's eyes. Nothing even remotely close to a normal animal or even human. And they weren't even green, so at least my boyfriend's skinwalker stayed behind. All I could see in the darkness of my neighbor's yard was two glowing red eyes. Maybe this was a good time to piss my pants, and God only knows I was close. I've always heard the term fight or flight, and I figured I would be a flight type of girl. I was right. I threw the bags on the ground and basically flung my body back to the front door, frantically trying to turn the knob to get it to open. I heard twigs break under someone's steps, and that's when I pissed my pants. I guess I am more of a baby than my boyfriend after all. The door slammed loudly behind me, but nothing could mask the growling noise I heard from the other side of the glass. Because it was so dark, I really couldn't make out more than a silhouette, but the silhouette was enough to make me go from pissing myself to shitting myself. The outline looked sort of fuzzy, like it had some type of hair on its body. The worst part were its eyes. Somehow they were even brighter than they were before, a piercing and sinister red. I had already locked the knob. Thank God I've formed that habit, but I needed to find my keys to fully lock the door. I didn't want to take my eyes off of whatever was on the other side of that glass, but I knew I had to. It had to be tonight that my keys weren't hanging on the hook where I usually kept them. I'll remember this the next time I toss them on my desk. When I turned back around from grabbing my keys, those glowing red eyes were no longer staring at me. Somehow that made this entire situation way worse. I needed to see where he was stalking me from. I couldn't really focus on that at the moment, so I hurried towards the door, locked it with my key, and closed the inside door. The windows were all closed and locked, so I knew that he couldn't get inside without me hearing some resistance. It took about 3 hours for me to finally calm down, but until then I kept my eyes open. I barely blinked until the stress from the situation turned into fatigue, and I could barely keep my eyes open. I didn't feel the same presence as I did while I was outside, so maybe that was a good sign, but I really didn't want to fall asleep. I felt vulnerable enough sitting in my bed, a hammer and mace next to me, of course. But I did. I fell asleep, in my piss-soaked pants, might I add, and woke up the next morning, alive. I didn't feel alive. I felt like 10 years had been taken off my life. But I was breathing and I wasn't hurt, not physically at least. Oh, shit. Gavin. I need to tell Gavin. 10:34 a.m. He was probably asleep, but at that point I really didn't care, so I FaceTimed him. I saw myself in the front view camera. My eyes were bloodshot and puffy, probably from keeping them open for so long. I guess this kind of freaked Gavin out. Nat? What the hell? Did you dash? I know it's rude to interrupt, but I had to cut him off. I'm sure he probably didn't understand most of what I said, considering I was basically racing through the story, but his face at the end of my story told me that he understood enough. And he actually believed me, probably because I looked like I had the life sucked out of me. I haven't felt the presence of that thing since that night, and it's been 2 nights since I saw those red eyes outside my door, but I have a feeling it isn't going to leave me alone forever. I just hope that next time I'll be prepared, even though it's pretty hard to prepare for a Skinwalker attack. But if I do get attacked, blame my idiot boyfriend, since he basically summoned it to my front door. Maybe I'll get him to kill it for me. 5th story. Never shoot a Skinwalker. My 2 buddies and I went on a hunting trip for bull elk last November, and we were having a great time, to say the least. That, however, soon would change after what we saw on the 3rd day. Now, I'm not one for superstition, and I don't believe in ghosts at all, but what we saw out there really changed my view about those sorts of things. The trip started out normally after we parked our trailers at camp. We got there a day early before the hunt officially started, so we could settle in and get some scouting done. Only Eric and I had licenses because Brian didn't draw out this year, but he wanted to come along with us anyway. Brian also brought along his German Shepherd named Lucy, which stayed back at camp with a leash that was connected to a metal spike. The spike was so deep in the ground that I wondered if we would be able to get it out. I asked Brian, and he just told me that his dog was so strong that it had to be that deep. I enjoyed playing with Lucy. She was always excited to see me and would greet me by jumping up on 2 legs and trying to lick my face. Eric, however, was not amused by her and would constantly yell at her to leave him alone. Anyway, the first 2 days we saw so many cow elk in valleys and on sides of the mountains that I thought for sure we would see some bulls out there, but there were none among them. It wasn't until the 3rd day of the hunt that we saw a bull elk, but it was too far away to take a shot at. And even if we were able to hit it, it would take hours trying to pack that thing out. So that evening we decided to hunker down next to some fallen trees and were able to watch a hillside. While we were surveying the area, Brian spotted a coyote about 250 yards walking to a small pond of water, strangely as if it was maned. Eric took out his binoculars to take a closer look, and he started to describe it, saying, "That coyote. It ain't right looking. It has a hunch on its back like a bear, and its jaw. Oh man, its damn jaw seems like it's been broken, and now it's just drooping there like a dead fish." "Let me see those binos," I asked curiously with an outstretched hand. Eric handed them to me, and as he did, he seemed to grasp his gun tightly. I took them and looked at the animal and said, "You're right. That thing's jaw is just hanging there. Also, Did you happen to notice its hair? It's so long and unevenly dispersed." I then handed the binoculars to Brian, and he looked at the coyote for 1 second and screamed. "Shoot, Brian, shut up. We're hunting," Eric whispered harshly. "What did you see?" I asked as I looked at his shocked facial expression. Brian looked at his feet as he muttered, I saw my dog Lucy, but it wasn't her? I don't know what that was. It couldn't have been your dog. When I looked at it, it looked like a dying coyote. It didn't have the large black spot on its back or your dog's strawberry red sides and underbelly," I said in a plain yet confused manner. "Well, since we ain't gonna see anything out here cause you screamed like a baby, I'm going to put that coyote out of its misery," Eric said angrily as he raised his rifle and looked through the scope. A large shot followed, and we saw the animal drop down soon after. It was a clean kill, and Eric was curious about seeing what was wrong with the animal up close, so he started getting ready to hike out. As he got his stuff together, he said, "You probably just didn't get a good look at it, Brian. Your dog is fine." Brian stood up, and as he brushed the dirt off but he replied, "I swear I saw my dog, but an evil, demented version of it with human eyes, but you guys are probably right. There's no way she could have had the strength to yank out the metal stake holding her back at camp." "Well, let's go find out the truth about this animal," I said somewhat excitedly as I started walking toward the dead animal. It took us about half an hour to hike over to it, and we lost sight of the animal's corpse as we had to pass through some trees. Once we finally got to the spot where the animal had dropped, there was no corpse, just a puddle of blood. However, the blood was blackish and very dense. Eric observed the scene and started to scratch his head as he said, "I could have sworn I shot that thing straight through its heart. There's no way it could have just gotten back up and walked off." I had an eerie feeling about the whole situation, and Brian was still afraid that it might have been his dog that got shot. Eric, however, noticed a trail of blood leading into a dark tree line. Without asking, he started to follow it, and he loaded his gun. As he did, me and Brian were both freaked out and just watched Eric as he went into the forest. He soon went out of sight, and I could not leave him here, so we waited. I passed the time by taking a skinny stick and poking at the puddle of blood. It smelled terrible, and the aroma hit me pretty hard, so much so that my stomach convulsed and I threw up. "You okay?" Brian asked as he put his hand on my back. Before I could answer, there was a loud shot that echoed through the trees, and we both looked at the direction it came from. "Must have found the animal," I said as I spit into the grass. As soon as I said this, we could now see Eric, but he was full on sprinting. "Run!" he screamed as he ran at us. I noticed that he must have dropped his gun because he wasn't carrying it. I was about to ask him what happened, but Brian grabbed my arm and yanked me towards where we had parked the truck. Without hesitation, I ran. We soon made it back to the truck, and my shoulder hurt from the rubbing of the gun strap. I looked back at Eric, who slowed down for nothing. I soon looked behind him and saw nothing chasing us. So I opened the truck and got in without worry. Eric then climbed in and told me to hit the gas and go. I was so perplexed on what Eric saw out there, and I knew that he hardly ever got scared of anything, so this started to freak me out. I started driving fast back to camp, and I asked Eric, "What did you see out there that was scary enough to make you drop your gun?" "I don't know, man. There was no damn animal." I followed the trail of blood, and it stopped at the base of a tree, and I was wondering how a coyote was able to climb a tree, but when I looked up, I saw this hairy humanoid creature there. It smelled so freaking bad. Eric went on about how scary that thing was and how he was done with the hunting trip and wanted to go home. We soon pulled into camp and mutually decided that we were going home. I started to pack my things and then felt like something was missing. I then thought to myself, "Lucy? Where is Brian's dog? She usually always is so excited to see us back at camp. She can't stop barking and whining to be set free." As soon as I thought this, Brian started screaming and crying. I ran over to where he was and saw that his dog was gone. However, on further inspection, I noticed what Brian was looking at. Something had pulled out the metal stake in the ground and strung Lucy up on a nearby tree and had skinned her. Brian just could not stop crying, and Eric ran over to see what was wrong and just stood there, jaw dropped and frozen. He then muttered, "She was skinned alive. There's a bunch of bruising caused by struggling around her neck where the collar is." "Shut up, Eric. You ain't helping," I said as I put my shoulder around Brian, who had unstrung his dog's body from the tree. "Skinwalker," Eric said in a low tone of voice as he looked into the distance. He then screamed, "It's a damn skinwalker." I followed his gaze and saw an animal that looked like Lucy, but it had human eyes and a sickly green glazed-looking coat of fur. Brian stopped crying and just stood there, eyes locked on the beast. Eric then whispered with his voice quivering, "We all run to the truck on a count of 3. Just leave everything else." Brian and I slowly nodded and agreed to the plan. "Okay. 3, 2, 1. Eric whispered sharply, and we all took off like a pack of gazelles for the truck. We hopped in, and as soon as we did, we saw the Skinwalker lunge at us and struck the right side door with such a powerful blow that nearly tipped over the whole truck. It didn't stop me whatsoever, and I drove out of there faster than I ever could have. After that, none of us ever went hunting again in that area. We never even went back to claim our camping trailers and supplies. It was too terrifying to think that what happened to Brian's dog could happen to us, and that thing would walk around in our skin. Since that experience, I am now a superstitious person. 6th story. Skinwalker stories from the past. This is a story my family told me when I was growing up. We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her 2 brothers were home alone while my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house, and like many people from the reservation, they didn't have electricity. It had been dark outside for about an hour, and my aunt and my uncles were getting ready for bed. Outside, they heard noises, as if someone moving things around outside. My oldest uncle went to look out the front window and saw a figure out by the truck. This was immensely out of the ordinary because the closest neighbor was miles away. Whatever it was opened the truck door and began to dig through the personal items that my family had left in the vehicle. My aunt and uncles were frightened by the sight and knew that they should take action. They took out the rifle and all steadied themselves to hold it up. They flung open the door and aimed the gun at the dark figure. The figure turned and started to walk towards them, totally unfazed by the weapon. My uncle pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The figure drew closer, and my aunt began to smell something like a rotting corpse. It was so strong it made her gag. My uncle continued to pull the trigger with no luck, and the figure came closer and closer. Off in the distance, headlights were coming up the road. My grandparents were returning. The figure looked toward the lights and started to move away and tucked itself behind a tree near the house. My oldest uncle ran toward the truck with the gun. My grandfather got out of the car, and my uncle pointed to the tree. The thing was poking out its head to observe what they were doing. My grandfather ran into the house and over to the stove and grabbed a handful of ashes and rubbed over the gun and placed an ash-covered bullet into the chamber. He walked out onto the porch and fired toward the tree. Whatever that thing was didn't expect the gun to go off. The gunshot echoed and the dark figure began running. My grandma chased my aunt inside, and my uncles and my grandfather went after it. There weren't many roads or paths, so as my grandfather and uncles chased after the figure, the truck was bouncing and the headlights were not fixed on one particular spot. My uncle swears that whenever the headlights would hit the figure, he saw a woman. Not only that, whoever it was running on all fours like a bear. My grandfather eventually stopped the truck, and as they neared the ditch that drops about 20 feet, He got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared and that he knew it was her and to leave his family alone. A few days passed and there was news that the woman that my grandfather was yelling about had passed. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, say their name and it will kill them. 7th story. The Skinwalker. I don't consider myself to be a particularly superstitious person. That is to say, I get the occasional kick out of the horoscope, and my boyfriend and I like to humor the idea that spirits and poltergeists exist. We even joke about how we'd haunt people when we died and came back as ghosts. In fact, my boyfriend refuses to go anywhere near a Ouija board. Refuses to even think of it. Why even tempt it? He'd say. Why would you want to taunt evil ghosts like that? Ghosts never play fair, and if you piss one off, you're screwed. I don't think he was ever serious. Just precautionary. But maybe he was right. God, this all happened so recently, I'm still shaken. Can barely write about it now without my nerves acting up. Okay, here it goes. A few weeks ago, my mom, sister, and I went to Colorado for an entire week of vacation. We were going to drive all over the state, visit the national parks, and go horseback riding and whitewater rafting and so much more. I was excited, and I sorely needed a break from work. Anyway, we drove a grueling 16 hours out there and spent our first day rafting down the rivers. After an extremely wet but exhilarating day, we drove to a ranch house to go horseback riding. We arrived at sunset, so it was too late to do anything, but we had all next day to ride the trails and see the sights. The ranch was dumpy, to put it nicely. It was all run down with scraps of steel everywhere, and the shoddy lodging cabins were in desperate need for repair. I swear the roof over our shack of a cabin was a giant piece of drywall with shingles stapled to the top. My sister and I thoroughly checked the place for spiders and bugs before we even thought of bringing our luggage inside. It was only for the night, I reassured myself. Just one night in a dumpy shack on a rock-hard bed that probably had bed bugs under the sheets. I shuddered at the thought. My mom tried to cheer us up. She had brought skewers and a pack of hot dogs to roast over the communal fire pit. Happy to get out of the shack, my sister and I made a nice cozy fire, and soon a few other visitors came out to sit around the fire and roast s'mores and share stories. We talked about where we were from, where we were going, and all our adventures along the way. Pretty soon the stories turned into tall tales and urban legends and the sort of stuff you'd usually tell around a bonfire. That's when I spoke up. I love stories, especially scary ones. And hey, we're out west. We're in Native American territory. Why not liven the place up with my favorite local myth, the legend of the Skinwalkers? Now, for the uninitiated, Skinwalkers are very evil, very dangerous beings. They were humans who gained the ability to take on the form of an animal by wearing its pelt, usually through very dark and taboo magic. I knew all this and told my story. Who doesn't love a good ghost story, after all? Everyone seemed to be enjoying it. I admit I took some creative liberties, really just retold an old werewolf story, but with a Skinwalker as the monster instead. I improvised a lot of the story and added a few things that weren't in the mythos at all. I gave our beloved frightening Skinwalker wide, crazed eyes with pinpoints for pupils with a matching insane smile. I made the Skinwalker horribly misshapen, swollen joints and arms that were too long and legs that were too short and a head that never sat straight on its shoulders. I made it as terrifying as I could imagine. No one minded. They actually really liked it. A man from Kentucky admitted the visuals alone were enough to creep him out. Victory in my book, if you ask me. And once I was done, everyone decided it was getting really late. Our firewood was dwindling, and it was as good a time as any to turn in for the night. We packed up our skewers and esmores, doused the fire, and headed to our little shacks. I tossed and turned a lot trying to fall asleep. I couldn't get comfortable on that damn bed. A rock was probably cozier than that mattress. So against my better judgment, I got out of bed and walked about the cabin. I reasoned that if I stayed up late enough, I would be so tired that I would fall asleep no matter what I was laying on. I think I briefly contemplated sleeping on the floor. I wasn't that desperate yet. It was pitch black outside. No lights from any nearby street lamps, no car headlights, hell, not even the cabin lights were on. And I don't remember seeing a single star. It was a bit creepy, but I shrugged off the shiver creeping up my back as simply the cold tile floor beneath my feet. I did, however, find it odd there weren't any lights on at all on the property. You'd think there'd be a floodlight on the horse stables or in the main office, but no, nothing. That was really weird. I stepped outside in my flimsy foam flip-flops to get a better look. I could barely make out the ranch, and for some stupid reason I decided to go walking around. Eventually my eyes adjusted where I could see well enough to navigate. I paced up and down the road where the cabins sat and then circled around to the fenced-in field where the horses were out grazing. Except there weren't any horses. Probably in the stables for the night, I reasoned. I shivered again. It was getting cold. I turned around to head back to my own cabin. It was stupid of me to be out all alone at an obscene hour, I had realized. I needed to get to bed. But when I turned, there was something in the middle of the road. Its shape was swallowed up by the surrounding darkness. I could barely make it out. But whatever it was tall and thin. I shrugged it off as just a pole or something else and kept walking, but then it moved. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and I could barely breathe. I just imagined that, I said. I just imagined it. I'm freaking myself out. Get your fucking head straight. It moved again. My paralyzed throat managed to squeak out a pathetically weak whimper as my legs began to lose strength. I shivered violently against a cold that was building up inside of me. My eyes began to focus on the impossibly dark figure standing against a barely visible sleek gray night. Now I could see it. It was a person, but like nothing I had ever seen before. Its arms were impossibly long. Its legs impossibly short. It had a torso far too long for its rail-thin body and a head much too big for its pencil-thin neck. Its right arm was sticking out to its side, swinging up and down. Its blockish head, rolled onto its left shoulder, jerkily twitched up and down, up and down. It didn't move other than that, just stood there, twitching, arms jerking up and down, head lolling around its shoulder. I still stood there like the dumb fuck I was. My cabin was a few hundred yards behind that thing, and I wasn't so stupid as to try to walk past it. My only option was to go around, behind the cabins and the stables, and hope it didn't see me. I forced myself to lift my foot off the ground to step backwards. My flip-flop made a loud, wet smacking sound as it cracked against my foot, and I immediately froze in horror. The thing stopped too. It stood there perfectly straight, perfectly still, listening. I stayed as still as I could. My breath was shallow and panicked, and I tried to force myself to slow my breathing before I started wheezing. My heart thundered in my chest. My whole body was shaking. But I didn't move. Neither did it. I began to slowly, so goddamn slowly, bend over and slipped my feet out of those fucking flip-flops. My feet touched the dirt and the crumbly gravel, but at least now I could move silently. I spared a quick glance to the side to see where I was going. 2 cabins were immediately to my right. I could slip between them with ease, disappear out of sight. I only looked away for a second. When I turned back, that fucking thing was gone. It was fucking gone. It fucking knew I was there. It was coming for me. Oh fuck. Yet I still couldn't fucking move. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move no matter how loud my head screamed, "Run, run, run, UFUCK, run." I heard something behind me. I turned instinctively, even though I knew fucking better. I still turned the fuck around. I was greeted with two bulging eyes. Oh fuck, it's eyes. Staring at me unblinking with two black pinholes for pupils and an insane smile that was stretched far too wide to be anything remotely human. My paralysis broke as I stared at that fucking thing. I fucking ran, crying my eyes out, trying to scream, but a horrible lead weight in my throat silenced me. My feet pounded on the dirt. I stomped over anything in my way. I trampled over a jagged rock, slicing my foot wide open. I ignored the pain. I ignored my body screaming in agony. I ignored my own blood pouring from the wound. I didn't care. I just ran. I felt the cold creeping up my back. Oh God, that cold. It was sinking right into my bones. I couldn't stop shaking or sobbing, and I didn't stop running until I burst into the cabin. I slammed the door shut, deadbolted the lock, and leaped into my bed. I huddled under the blankets, hiding my head, and there I gasped and shook for breath. And I waited. I didn't sleep that entire night. I was too scared. I couldn't get rid of that chill. All I thought about was that thing, standing there and twitching. Morning finally broke, and I finally allowed breath of relief. Whatever I had seen had not come for me, and now that it was light, it could no longer take me by surprise. My mom noticed my bleeding foot and the blood I tracked through the cabin. I shrugged it off, said I cut myself the night before when we were making s'mores. I don't think she believed me, but she didn't push it. We left not long after that. And as we left, I looked at the place where that thing once stood, and I shuddered again. But there was nothing. I assured myself there was nothing. We said goodbye to the ranchers and to our companions, and I noticed the man from Kentucky who said had thoroughly enjoyed my story. He told me again how much he liked it. Said he was going to tell it to his own kids when he got home. They really liked scary stories, he said. And as we drove away, his head rolled onto his left shoulder, and he smiled a wide, insane smile as he waved us goodbye. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.